Why are we different and how are we the same? These two questions have been at the core of my work over the last 30 years. They form the center of a theory and a methodology that I've been working with and continue to work with today of what I call culture bump theory and a culture bump methodology for dealing with differences. A culture bump is just a difference. Anything that is not the way I would do it. And although I'm using the term culture bump, we can use this same process with gender differences, religious differences, professional differences, age differences. The same process will work. But I have had the good fortune in these last 30 to 40 years of working with countless students from around the world, as well as American students. And it is from them that I have learned most of what I know about myself and about culture bumps. A culture bump can be the key that we use. When my students do something that is unexpected, something that I don't expect them to do, or something that I would not do, that I would do differently, I have a couple of choices. I can ignore it, I can try to change it, or I can try to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And it is usually that last one that I do. That seems to be a common human reaction. That if we can understand why they do what they do, somehow things will kind of fall back into place. What my research suggests is that we really do need to do that. We do need to understand why we're different. Why do people do the kinds of things that they do? But there's something else that I call the knowledge dichotomy. And at that moment of when the difference occurs, when we encounter a culture bump or some kind of a difference, there's actually a dichotomy. There are actually two things that are happening. One, we lose our kind of normative role, if you will. We don't really know exactly what's going on. And that's the impetus for trying to understand why they are different, why they're doing what they're doing. However, at the same moment, there's something else that is occurring simultaneously. And that is, we lose our sense of who we are in relationship to that other person. This is different than losing our normative bearings, if you will, because this has to do with relationship. Because we tend to focus, and when I say we, I'm speaking as human beings, because we human beings tend to focus on why we are different, we don't always take care of the other. So this can lead to things like having a great deal of knowledge about another culture, even living there for many years, and still having a sense of separateness, still not really feeling like we really are the same. They're still those people. We can like them. We can even want to be like them. But there is a sense of separateness. When we use the word culture bump, when we say, I had a culture bump, rather than telling a story about what he or she just did, it is by using the term culture bump, it is as though we're doing a microcosm of the entire process of culture bump analysis. A couple of things happen. When I say I had a culture bump, number one, the responsibility is mine. It's mine, and that's good news because I can do something about my reaction. I probably can't do anything about an entire other culture. The other thing that does is it depersonalizes the entire incident. It stops being about somebody doing something to me. It becomes about my culture bumping into another culture. It allows the possibility of our humanity being in common while our cultures may differ. My research tends to suggest that there is a process by which we can actually deal with both sides of the dichotomy. We can not only find the normative behavior that explains why there are differences, but we can also repair the rift in the relationship. Uh, the methodology that has evolved out of all of this work uh, has a couple of steps and can be summarized in some skill development. Number one, we have to be able to recognize when we do have a bump. We have to become conscious of the differences, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant they may seem. And to use the term culture bump. The other thing that using that term does is it gives us a common language. If once this concept has been explained to individuals who are working together from different language and cultural backgrounds, it's a common understanding, so that I can say to someone, oh, that's a culture bump for me, or I had a culture bump when you said that. And it stops being personal. I know that he knows that I know that he knows what I'm talking about. In the same way that someone from my own cultural background knows, we have that depth of knowledge. And so it begins to intercede on the process that leads us to separateness. So being able to identify and to appropriately name a culture bump is a very important and critical skill, and not as easy as one would think. Um, it seems to be more intuitive for us to tell the stories rather than to simply use the term "I had a culture bump." The second skill that we need to learn to develop is to manage our emotional responses, and part of being able to identify begins to help with that. Um, Another skill is to be able to identify and articulate our own expectations as well as the expectations of someone, of the other, in that particular situation. And then here's the critical part. We need to be able to identify the meaning of having our own expectations met. We then go back and have a conversation with the other about those meanings, because the meanings are always universal. And it is out of those conversations that we connect at a very authentic and very profound level. What my work has led me to understand is that we really can, we human beings, can connect authentically and consistently with anyone, no matter how different we may be. No matter, and we don't particularly have to like the other person. We don't have to agree with them. We can connect as human beings without having to resolve the differences. And I think that is really, really critical, because I think a lot of times when we talk about dialoguing, implicit within that is the idea that somehow we're going to resolve the difference. And what my work suggests is that we don't really have to do that. We can connect without resolving the differences. So, I hope this has been helpful, and happy culture bumping.